Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Finding the Gold, How to Assess and Leverage Team Strengths. I'm Allison DeFlorio, and I am so thrilled to be here on the heels of the 2026 Winter Olympic Games with my teammate and colleague, Romaine Jones-Wise. Hi, Ro.
Hi, Allison. Good to see you.
To, good to see you too, and thank you for joining me for today's conversation. Uh, for our listeners, we wanted to capture the excitement and the energy, and even more importantly, the planning and the strategy that goes behind creating an Olympic team. You know, Olympians don't win by luck. There's a lot of preparation, identifying of talent, and building the right support systems to wrap around those individuals and those teams to really help them get a place on the podium. And many of those same strategies translate very nicely into what businesses should be focusing on. So Ro and I put our heads together and wanted to share with you kind of what are those magical strategies around cohesion and role clarity and building the right support structures that you, as a divisional leader, an organizational leader, a leader of talent strategy within your organization, can apply to help provide your teams the opportunity to be successful. So, before we get started, I have a couple of housekeeping tips for everybody. As always, these webinars will be recorded and we will send a link out afterwards. So if you know of someone who wasn't able to attend or you find that this might be helpful for someone else on your team, please feel free to share. Ro and my contact info will be at the end of will be included in this deck. So if there are questions that you have throughout the session that we're not able to address, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And on questions, even though your phones will be muted, we do encourage you to use the chat feature to ask any questions that you may have, and we will do our best to answer those. With that, we want to go ahead and share a little bit about ourselves. For those of you who already know Exude and know myself and Ro, welcome back. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who are new and are meeting us for the first time, I'm Allison DeFlorio, co-founder, managing partner of Exude Human Capital. I've, over the 20 years with this firm, have had the pleasure of meeting leaders in all types of organizations and working with them through HR strategies, HR processes, and policies in helping them develop HR infrastructures through that lens of equity inclusion that really support their teams and allow their people to do the great work that they were hired to do. So I hope to share with you through today's conversation some of the lessons that I've learned that have helped our organizations develop their winning teams. And I'll turn it over to Ro to share a little bit about her background.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Romaine, also known as Ro or HR Lettuce. I think that's going to be my new hashtag, HR Lettuce. I have been with Exude now. This is my 5-year anniversary. I'm so excited to be able to say that with Exude Human Capital, 20 plus years in HR, and I work intentionally to help transform organizations to be culture aligned for people to thrive and excel and be successful as they expand or grow in their roles in whichever direction they want to, if that's growing out or growing up. And really creating a space for leaders to have the support that they need. And I do that by way of outsourced HR, leadership development, facilitation, training, inclusion, belonging, really being intentional about seeing the big picture and also helping leaders find practical ways to solve some of the challenges that they're dealing with in the day-to-day operations of their organization. So, very excited about today's conversation. looking forward to sharing with you some of my wins, and sometimes when I didn't make it to the podium with gold, just to show the balance that happens in the workplace. So I'm looking forward to today's conversation, and please put questions and things in the chat because we can make this very interactive today.
You know, Ro, you said something important. They're not all wins. And I think we hope to pepper this. If any of you have had the opportunity to see any of the Olympics this year, you'll be recently reminded of some of the struggles and some of the superstars that were expected to perform that maybe didn't have their best performance and didn't make it to the podium. And then others who made life-altering changes to how they thought about their performance and went from not being expected to perform to receiving gold medals. I think about Breezy Johnson, for those of you, she's one of the downhill, I might say the sport wrong. I think it's alpine skiing was her sport. And she had a couple of years ago had a tragic knee injury from which they did not think she was going to make a comeback. And yet, because of her determination, the preparation investment in preparation that she made, the support systems around her that were pulling in the same direction, she not only made a comeback, but she won the gold in her event. So again, it's never luck. It
Mhm.
really has a lot to do with the preparation and the team behind them. So for today, let's talk a little bit about what we can anticipate talking about. We're going to talk about what makes an Olympic caliber team. We're going to talk about how can you assess the current team's strengths and then make decisions on how you can provide the appropriate supports. Identify gaps and opportunities. What are you missing? What do you have? What do you need? That will help you with talent planning and workforce planning. And then, very importantly, building competencies and strengths. And we have a lot to share in this space, particularly around competencies and making sure that they're clear and behavioral based so that people know what to work toward and development conversations are clearer. And then lastly, leveraging team strengths for performance. Ro and I talk about superpowers and the strengths of that and then the possible unintended impact of that, but we'll share some tips and tidbits throughout this session. And hopefully you'll walk away with some suggestions on things you can do immediately to start assessing your team and making some adjustments. So before we get started, we thought it might be nice to kind of get your thoughts on what do you, in the roles you sit in, your leaders, your coaches, what are the characteristics of an Olympic coach? And you can type this into the chat. What words come to mind that you would use to describe the key characteristics of a successful Olympic coach? I see some words coming in here, Ro.
Leadership, focused, inspiring. That's what I'm seeing so far.
Hmm.
Give everybody a couple more seconds to chime in. It's okay if you put the sandwich down and type guidance. That's a good one.
Hmm.
Good communicator, motivator.
Give it a couple more seconds here. We'd love to hear three more. Can we get three more?
Aware of industry trends.
Mm.
I know we do love these. Keep them coming. Knows when to push and when to support and rest. Very important. And we're going to really talk about that as we get to the competency building and the gaps and opportunities. Thank you all. Definitely. Thank you for your participation. Allison, what would you say are the characteristics of an Olympic coach?
Well, first of all, I agree with everything that was said. And I do think that finding the right balance between when to push and when to pull, and when to rest, I think that to me, that being in tune and building trust. I think building trust that you're able to say the harder things when in a way that's going to resonate and motivate is key. And that can be tough to do.
Can be very tough to do. I agree
What
with that.
about you, Ro?
I think trust is a major factor. And I also think it's very important that leaders understand the importance of being integral, like having integrity and
Hmm.
transparency to the extent possible. But I think that's what fosters trust, because all of those other components that were listed kind of fall under that umbrella. If I trust my leader, I understand the communication. I can receive the information coming, be it, recognition or constructive, and it creates cohesion where personal and operational trust reside. So I think trust is a major characteristic, in my opinion.
Great. I think we're going to talk just a little bit about that over the course of our conversation today. If you could go to the next slide, Ro, I
Mhm.
think that, when we were planning for this webinar, we wanted to come up with kind of what is that overarching theme to think about that pulls through everything that we talk about, and it is that concept of trust. And this quote by the U.S. women's soccer team, not Winter Olympics, but still an Olympic coach, is connecting on a personal level to build trust, though not at the expense of honesty or the collective needs of the team. Think about that. Think about how that applies to leadership, coaching in a business setting. So let's talk a little bit about trust, Row, and some of the things that make that Olympic caliber team. What have you seen work?
Definitely seen a clear definition of roles. When I say that has been one of the highlights of work that I've done with organizations over the past few years, when people's roles are clearly defined and expectations are articulated in multiple ways so that they can really grasp and understand, it really creates a lane for someone to travel, but then also know when to step out of that lane appropriately and engage with other individuals. The shared mission, and sometimes this is really overlooked in organizations because people sometimes just assume that when people join an organization, they know the mission, they know why they're there. And I agree that they should, but they may not understand how the mission directly impacts their role and helps them to understand how, as an individual contributor, they are contributing to the success of the mission of the organization. So, understanding the shared mission and defining roles is very impactful for an Olympic caliber team. But then it comes right back to that trust factor. It is really centering around an area, and I've seen a lot of organizations challenged in this space because folks are not sure how to hold people accountable right now. And it's, how do I action accountability? How do I communicate when it's not always a happy message? And what I've seen recently is there's a lot of avoidance that's happening around accountability and communication. But when you have a high trust culture, there is a tendency for people to be able to receive information that may not always be favorable, but it is really designed to make them better. So a leader coming to say, this is what I'm observing. There's an opportunity for us to do this differently. Here's what I suggest. How can we, put our heads together to come up with an approach?
And I think that really, if you think about the Olympic athletes, if a coach weren't watching, let's say a figure skater who's making a very slight miscalculation that
Mhm.
he or she may not even see, but the coach is externally observing it. It's the duty of that coach to bring it to that person's attention. Because even though that person may not see it, him or herself,
Mhm.
then the coach can say, like you just said, I've observed, try this and see if you notice a difference. And that can be the difference between landing a jump and not landing a jump.
Yeah, and it shows up in the workplace. If you
Mhm.
observe a team member or a direct report who thinks in their mind they're taking the best approach to get a task done, and you as the leader observe that there's a slight tweak that may happen. Think about time management. You have an employee who does stellar work, but they don't prioritize work and do everything under pressure last minute, or procrastinator. I'm only speaking from my own experience.
Mhm.
Uh, the feedback was how can you adjust the time so that everything is not a final crunch? And offering recommendations, and I've been offered recommendations that have really transformed how I engage, how I work, how to ask for help, because now I can trust that the information coming to me is not coming to belittle or make me feel small, but to help me be better and to help me grow. That's the design of Olympic caliber coach. How can I make my athlete better?
That continuous improvement. Okay, so for the people listening and watching right now, how can they begin to assess? How do they? What's available to business leaders and leaders to be able to assess team strengths?
So there's a lot of things at our disposal that sometimes we overlook. So taking a skills inventory or doing compatibility mapping is a great way to kind of start to make the assessments. Behavioral strength-based assessments are there. Leveraging performance data reviews. And I mean leveraging them in a way that the feedback is really going to be utilized to be goal focused. What is the forward trajectory that an employee wants to take? And then asking other people who interact with this person, getting some 360 feedback, having stakeholder or manager interviews with anybody that interacts with an individual just to find out, you know, what's working well, where's there opportunity to do differently, what upskilling may be beneficial. There's a lot of ways to assess and really understand how to move a person forward in the larger scheme of things when we can utilize all of those tools and methods.
Yeah, and I would just say for those of you that have done 360s, you probably know this. For those of you who have not done 360s, there's a process to educate those who are going to be participating in a 360 evaluation, as well as a way to communicate the findings to someone. So just make sure that you're thoughtful about that because getting peer feedback, if there's not a culture of trust or not a culture of feedback, can be
Mhm.
very intimidating, and it may have an unintended outcome if it isn't presented effectively the first time.
Very valid point. Very valid
We
point.
we talked about core competencies at the
Mhm.
outset of this, and Ro, I know you've done a lot of work in this space, and I always hear you say, core competencies can't be words on paper. Can you talk a little bit about how to define that, how to build core competencies so that they resonate with people?
Sure. Recently, I've had a few engagements where we were looking at performance management systems and going to competency-based models and trying to equip leaders on how to action competencies. What do these actually look like in real life? What does reliability look like? What does effective communication look like? What does integrity look like? And the accountability one is always the one where most people have the challenge, but it's putting into place and identifying what you want to see. And this can be done and it can vary for different levels of roles in the organization. So a competency of accountability may look different at the individual contributor level compared to a senior leader. But what we do is identify what it is, but also identify what it's not. So people have a clear delineation between the two. If I am someone who is supposed to leverage the competency of being reliable and dependable. That means that I'm showing up on time for meetings in person, virtually. I am effectively communicating when deadlines may not make the set target and asking for extensions ahead of time. What it does not look like is throwing somebody else under the bus,
Mhm.
or deflecting to point blame when I don't meet a deliverable as planned, and I point the finger at somebody else. Or and I'll use myself just for sake of conversation today. But that's kind of the challenge in making sure we really understand what these competencies look like in real life interactions in the workplace. How does this really show up? So I've been very successful with helping teams identify these and really map them out for all the levels of their organization.
And I think it gives clarity to leaders and coaches on how to have coaching conversations because you are then speaking to specific expected behaviors that will help develop those competencies in individuals. We talk a lot about superpowers too. We do it internally, jokingly, what your superpower is. But how do the natural strengths and superpowers play in, and how do you assess that? How do you find out what someone's superpower is?
It's very simple. You have conversation. We have to carve out time to have conversation. We cannot make assumptions that we know what someone else's superpowers. Yes, we may observe something that they do really, really well, and it could not necessarily be their superpower. It could be a natural strength, but we need to have time to engage in conversations, find out what motivates people. Are they looking for upward mobility? Do they prefer private recognition? Do they want to be forward facing with individuals or not? Do they want to work on analytics? Like, what is the thing that really brings them excitement? If you ask Allison, who is my direct supervisor at Exude, she will tell you that my superpower is mediation. I'm like a people whisperer. I don't know where it came from, but she would identify that my natural strength, though, is in facilitation and training, and that is really kind of my happy place. It is where I reside. So for leaders, I always encourage them to not make assumptions and fully engage their team in conversations and be very intentional and actively listen to the information that they're sharing with you, because it will identify areas that you may overlook or may not have considered, just by observation. So conversation is very important with identifying natural strengths and superpowers.
I also, and I know we had a conversation about this, sometimes people ask to identify their superpowers, identify something that they perceive to be a superpower, but maybe it really isn't their superpower. And
Mhm.
that becomes a coaching opportunity. That becomes, I observed, I know that you said your superpower is X. I've observed Y, and let's help you develop that superpower. What would it take? Here's what I would see.
Mhm.
What do you think you could do to grow to get to this superpower? So you can use it both ways.
You
If you don't
definitely
have
can.
the conversations and you observe, but you fail to have the conversation to share what you've observed, then you're missing the opportunity. Um, Talk to us about team dynamics and collaboration.
Understanding the strengths on your team is understanding how well people can integrate together, where the strengths can play off, and where the opportunities for development lie. Um, every team has people who bring certain qualities to the team that may not always look to be complementary, but really are. So if you have someone on your team who is very action oriented, very forward thinking, very visionary, and you also have someone on your team who is very methodical, process driven, wanting to make sure things are compliant. The two of those individuals may have a lot of tension because they don't work at the same pace, they don't see information the same way, but they're both necessary so that we don't get completely wrapped into doing something very much, visionary without thinking about the risk and the assessment and all of the things, but not getting stuck in trying to identify every possible mishap or outcome and having a response to that. The two complement each other because one is going to push you to go forward and the other is going to also kind of move forward with you, but with caution to make sure things are aligned and clear and compliant and direct. So there's balance and kind of understanding how to get those two to work together, to complement the strengths that they both bring, but also be able to highlight the areas of opportunity where the person who's action oriented may need to slow down, and the process oriented person may need to kind of just take some proactive initiative to move forward. So it's making sure we're finding out and educating. A big thing is equipping people to realize that the differences that we have can be complementary to one another, and it doesn't have to always breed tense conflict. It can breed the innovative conflict that makes organizations thrive, but it's all in making sure we're equipping everybody with the right tools to understand our differences.
You made me think of something too there when you really think about the difference between just a team, and then, a U.S. men's or women's hockey team, Olympic hockey team, right? Like both winning the gold.
Hmm.
What you described is at a certain point, and hockey's a great example, everyone has to take the lead at a certain point.
Hmm.
And those teams are so well trained and so have such trust among the members that they recognize when their opportunity to take the lead, it almost becomes innate. And
Hmm.
I never watched a lot of hockey, but I was glued to these two the U.S. women, the women's and the men's teams, and just watching how natural it looked on the ice, like how natural, as if they anticipated each other's roles, and there was never any hesitation to hand something off to a team member who had the opportunity to take it to the next level. So that's what you aspire to as a coach or a leader, is to have your teams become that fluid that
Hmm.
they know when to step in, and or they're strong enough to ask.
They're strong enough to ask, to know when to step in and
Yep.
also when to step back.
And when to step back. Yeah, yeah. When we talk about the scouting and the time trials and performance analytics, I think there are a lot of analogies there too. Olympic coaches, leaders are always scouting for new talent. Those of you in your organizations, always scouting for new talent on your existing team
Mhm.
and outside your existing team. But I think for the purposes of this conversation, think about, you can have a superpower performer in your organization. And sometimes we get fixated, and that becomes the person. It's like, I'm just going to give it to Ro because I know she can get it done. Just give it to Ro. Am I overlooking others on the team to be able to have them learn, develop, and grow confidence and competence in an area by maybe giving them something that might take them a little bit longer to do, or may require a little bit more of my time to help them do. But as a leader, I would be remiss if I didn't constantly look for the opportunity to scout for talent on our existing team.
I agree with you. There's a lot of opportunity to find those stretch assignments. How can we reimagine work, or for the analogy, reimagine training for individuals on the team? Is there a way to get someone more exposure to lead meetings, to partner on projects, just to kind of get them equipped for the next step, or to be able to possibly step in if someone has to step away? So I think the scouting of talent should be an ongoing, continuous thing that leaders do within their organizations, and not only looking at your direct reports, but looking across your organization for other individuals that may be able to take next level or next steps, in terms of collaborative projects or team engagement in a way that, we don't always consider. I am a big fan of reimagining how we engage and how we work to give people opportunity.
Ro, you shared a great story with me about someone you know who had a really interesting experience. I think it illustrates this point quite a bit of making sure that you're preparing others on your team to step in. Would you mind sharing that?
Sure. So I was talking with a dear friend of mine, and we were talking about an Olympian. Her name is English Gardner, from the area here, who was part of I believe it was the track team for the Olympics, and she didn't qualify, but ended up going and still trained with the team and did all of the things. And then someone on the qualifying team was injured, and she was able to perform and compete, and she competed and won gold. But had she not been a part of the ongoing development and training and stayed in with the team in the cadence of getting that same attention and coaching, that may not have been her outcome. But she ended up with a gold medal in a sport in a sport that she didn't initially qualify for at the time. But it worked out because she was still equipped and ready to go and step in when necessary. So she was able to step up when somebody had to step away.
Great, great. So let's talk about identifying gaps and opportunities. That certainly is an important piece of all of this. Can you share a little bit about what that looks like and how what we do when we identify gaps and opportunities?
I definitely think there is, uh, for lack of redundancy, the opportunity to kind of sit and understand where the business is going. What are the business needs? How do we kind of align on the path forward? And then also making the necessary adjustments when we have role misalignment. I'm currently working with a client now who is trying to recalibrate roles within the organization because there have been some individuals that are in roles for an extended period of time that are not forward thinking in the manner that the leader would hope. And it's really creating this flatlining of performance and really reimagining roles, moving people around in the organizations and kind of challenging them to do next level thinking. So in terms of tapping into those underutilized strengths, people get comfortable. If you're always giving them what they're good at, you're missing an opportunity to develop other areas where strength may still be a possibility. So a lot of times in leaderships, and I know the biggest challenge with doing this type of work is the time constraint, because leaders are already taxed in handling multiple things and their own primary work responsibilities, plus the leadership of their teams. Time can be a major issue, which leaves opportunities for gaps in communication and technical skills because we're rushing. We have to be able to pace ourselves in this area because this is really where the return on investment happens. When we can identify the gaps and opportunities and prioritize them and be intentional about giving the resources and the support and the guidance, we can really transform our teams to be these functional, cross-functional, dynamic engagements where people can come and have a really great experience, learn from one another, and still contribute to the success of the organizations.
I also think too, something you said really resonated with me is, does it take more time to stop and train someone? Yeah, but it's an investment in
Mhm.
someone's development, which is going to be a time saver for you down the road. And if
Mhm.
that person stumbles and makes a mistake, guess what? They're going to learn from that. And it's unlikely they're going to make that same mistake again, or they'll have learned from it. So the recovery will be much faster. So I think that's that investment in developing people to fill the gaps and addressing the areas of opportunity, you have to be laser focused on that all the time.
You do. You do.
Let's talk about skill development and building competencies and strengths. You know, it's interesting. I've read that the average Olympic athlete trains 6 to 7 hours a day. And what's interesting about it is it's not just training on it for like a downhill skier. And it's not just skiing. It's not just downhill skiing. It's 2 to 3 hours of whatever that sport is. And then it's 2 to 3 hours of strength training to build the core, to build the strength to be able to do it. And then very interestingly, daily there is active recovery. And for athletes, that can be things like massage or sauna or things like that. How do you see that kind of concept in the business world, Ro?
I see it as all of those things, making sure people have time to do the work, but not becoming so redundant with the work that they don't have time to learn more. So factoring in development time, having the coaching and performance conversations, and not just having them once a year. I am a huge fan of ongoing, continuous feedback, coaching plans, figuring out how to help individuals prioritize areas where they need to focus. And then that kind of speaks to the deliberate practice. All right, I know this is an area where you're not performing as well as we would like to see. So let's be very intentional about doing this over the next week. And then we will follow up a week from now to see what progress has happened and where we need to adjust. Why continuous feedback is so important. But when you said that they get active recovery, I almost wanted to jump out of my skin because it is very important that we think about recovery time for our employees and for ourselves. And that's recovery time. We can take it granular down to, making sure you're not booking your schedule back to back to back to back. A small takeaway that I will offer right now, and some of you may already do this, if you allot an hour of time for a meeting, keep the actual meeting to 45 minutes and then give yourself 15 minutes so that you can recover from that conversation, figure out what action things that you need to do, allow your brain time to reset before you go into your next conversation. I don't know about anybody else, but I have a tendency to book back to back to back to back. And then by the time the end of the day comes, you don't remember what the first meeting of the day was all about. So the active recovery on that small scale is allotting a time management, but on the grander scale, it's really making sure that we are leveraging all of the resources and the tools that are available to us. Are you leveraging your employee assistance program? Are you really taking your PTO and stepping away from the work? And the active recovery is from a wellness standpoint. How are we caring for ourselves as humans to be able to continue this high level of performance? Because sometimes you have to step away, and that does not mean step away, put your out of office on and says, well, if there's an emergency, call me. No, this is why the trust factor is so important. Being able to step away, identify someone who is going to fill in your absence, and fully disengage for the set time that you're going to be there so that you can come back rejuvenated, recharged, refocused, ready to get back in with strength training and development. So I think we overlook sometimes that active recovery piece because we think that it's all about go, 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 train, 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 do, do, do. But it's necessary for us to be able to kind of pause, decompress, and recover so that we can be the best performers that we can.
Yeah, I also think there are simple things leaders can do, not sending emails at 5 of 5 in the evening with an expectation that something be done before
Mhm.
the end of the day. Or if you're going to send an email at night, which is fine. A lot of us work asynchronously and we do our best work on off hours, but schedule that email to arrive in the morning so the recipient of the email is allowed that time to, recover and can look at it fresh. I think as leaders, we have to give people downtime to regroup and refresh if we're expecting them to show up and be their best selves. So there's some simple things and then some more intentional things that can be done to ensure you're supporting the active recovery. And when we talk about, we have another quote here. Oh, Phil Jackson, so basketball, non-Olympian, but probably could have been. I'm sure many of his players wound up playing for the Olympics, unless that was before they allowed the professional athletes to play in the Olympics. But this, he says the strength of a team is each individual member, and the strength of each member is the team. What a beautiful statement that is.
That is a great statement. We had a very interesting question in the chat, if I can interject it right here, because I think it's applicable to what we were talking about before we jump to the next topic. The
Sure.
question was, how do we reinforce this? And I think this is the active recovery. If someone wants to keep an eye out on their email and calendar, even though we have asked to leave everything ready so they can take the time they need, for example, on parental leave. I think it's important that we get to the root cause of why they think it's important to keep their eye on their email or their calendar. Like, what is the driving motivation behind that? Is it a perception that they're not working? Is it a perception that they always need to be on? And then kind of clarifying the role and expectations of what is expected when someone is away, especially if they're on parental leave. And I have had some clients who have taken it to the extreme measure when employees are still engaging in email and communication on a leave of absence and have kind of muted their access to their
Yes.
emails and their calendars so that
Yeah.
they understand that when you're away, and it's okay. I think for this individual, it's kind of getting to the root cause of why there's still this urgency to keep an eye on email and calendar. And I look, a lot of people always say, well, I just don't want anything to fall through the cracks, or I don't want it to look like I'm not working, or if something happens, I want to get on it right away. Set the expectation around responsiveness. I think if we set clear expectations, like if I send an email, um, I expect some type of acknowledgement in within a business day, unless it's urgent. But if somebody is out on parental leave, they're really not there. They should have
Right.
that time to be with their self. Their If it's parental leave, I'm assuming there might be a new addition to the family, to really be able to bond and be fully engaged with their family. Allison, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think it goes back to what we said at the very beginning, where having good preparation. So, if somebody's going to be going out on a leave, something that's planned, you have time to prepare. So, if the underlying issue is this person's really concerned that balls are going to drop, and they have a personal, uh, uh, they have a sense of responsibility that nothing should drop while they're away, then that transition plan can help them put everything down so that whomever is taking over for them while they're out knows very clearly what needs to be. I also think having the system in place to support that individual, whether it's having the conversation saying, look, we've got this. We've got this. If there's anything really urgent that we can't handle, we will reach out. But just know you don't need, this is your time to be with your family. That's what we want you to do. It's that constant reinforcement that it's okay to step away.
Mhm.
And it's with good preparation and good systems in place that gives that person peace of mind to be able to do that effectively. Some people you're going to have a hard time flipping the switch on. That's just how they're wired. But I think with good preparation and to Rose's point, in extreme cases, you can actually change access for that period of time. I have seen that done. So it's just thinking through and getting into the head of the individual to make sure they feel comfortable uh, taking that time.
And you said something, I just want to add this piece here. If there's time to prepare for it, it's almost easy. In the event of an emergency, having the system and the processes documented somewhere is
Mhm.
also very helpful. I think it's always really good for individuals to kind of capture their process of the work that they do, the steps that they take, and document it somewhere, have an SOP. Just so if someone else has to step in, there's guidance on what needs to be done. A lot of times we hold all of the knowledge in our own heads, thinking like, oh, I know how to do this, but we don't, I won't say never. We're very reluctant to kind of capture it in best practice. And that is something I would highly recommend, taking on, especially if you have someone on your team who likes to document process. Great way to get them engaged and really understand the roles of the teammates around them.
Yeah, great point. Great point. So let's go to the next slide and talk about kind of wrapping all of this up and leveraging team strengths for performance.
I think a lot of this has come through in the conversations we've had, making sure that we're aligning the strengths to the strategic priority. So making sure you have individuals functioning in spaces where they're going to have the most impact. You don't want to leverage, someone who's unsure for a high visibility opportunity. There's a great opportunity for them to shadow and still be a part of that team, but not making them the forward-facing person who is going to engage maybe with senior leadership or your board of directors to make a presentation initially. But this is a great way to kind of give them still exposure to what it will look like as they prepare for future opportunities. Using the complementary capabilities and where we balance each other, I think is key. Um, if you have a team full of action-oriented go-getters who are just going to kind of just do stuff kind of at a moment's notice without thinking things all the way through, yeah, you'll get a lot of things started, but will you get things finished? I heard a great quote at a conference I was at this weekend that says we need to stop starting and start finishing. And I was like, that is profound to me. It is profound that, a lot of times we're so intentional about making sure people have multiple things that they can do and multitask in a way, but we need to make sure that we are not um overwhelming people with
Mhm.
too much of multiple things. So empowering people to empowering not only your team, but leaders to let people kind of deploy and give them some autonomy. Let them own it. Which sometimes it's kind of hard to do. Can you trust individuals on your team to follow your coaching plan without you micromanaging them? Reflective question.
And that's it. And if the answer to that is no, then you need to think about what opportunities do you need to provide to them so
Mhm,
that the answer would be yes. Because we haven't given them that autonomy or coached them properly, uh,
mhm.
or we're just holding things too tightly, uh,
Yes.
to give them the opportunity to develop.
And one of my favorites is celebrate the wins. Celebrate the wins. Take a moment to highlight the behaviors that you want to see repeated. Highlight the colleague that took the initiative to offer support to another colleague who had a very overwhelming workload and their workload wasn't is at full capacity. How can I support you? What can I do to help? Highlight those types of behaviors and not make all of the conversations constructive. So take a moment to celebrate the wins. It really does motivate people to continue on and continue with the behaviors that you want to see.
I would also say, in the spirit of the Olympics, I think we saw some pretty star performers not win, not
Mhm,
even make it to the podium, and very unexpectedly, probably for themselves as for their teammates. But yet there was such genuine team support to support those who maybe didn't have a good day. And I think that has to be something that's reinforced as well. So if you have a team performer who doesn't have their best presentation or doesn't have the best sales call or whatever it happens to be there as that coach to be supportive, to let them know, hey, this is a moment in time. What do I need to do to come back and win this? I have to share the story. If anyone saw the Alyssa Liu the U.S. Gold figure skater. And if you know her story, at 13, she was a world champion. At 16, she retired because she was mentally broken. She had it, the pressure, the lifetime of just nonstop practicing and preparing and this and that. And then she had this kind of reconciliation with herself, saying, I can do this. I love doing this. After not skating for 2 years, didn't touch the ice for 2 years, came back and said, no, I can do this, but I need to do this. I need to have a voice in this. I
Mhm.
need to have a voice in what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do it, how my coaching is done, what music I'm going to choose. We have that same opportunity as leaders to engage our teams in giving them a sense of autonomy. If you haven't seen her gold
Goodness.
winning performance, you have to watch it on YouTube because to see someone who is so confident and in just sheer joy, it wasn't as though she were competing at all. It was as if she was doing something she truly loved. And when we're in our element and we're well trained and we have the voice, our voice has been heard to help us shape where we're going. That beauty really comes out. So I think that's a message for everybody as well, is make sure that you uh, engage your talent and hear from them as to what would work for them, and then help guide and coach that and massage that so that becomes part of who they become as a major talent on your team.
That performance was unbelievable.
It really was. It
I want to
really.
echo what Allison said. If you have not seen it, definitely YouTube it. It was phenomenal. Phenomenal. Okay, I'm sorry. I interjected there.
So I think, to kind of wrap this all up, we would really like to reinforce the Olympic mindset.
Mhm.
Challenge your leaders, challenge yourselves to assess their team within the next 30 days. Try
Mhm.
it yourself before you do it with someone else. And use any of the tools that we shared. Again, we'll be sending this presentation out so you can be reminded of that. You may have things in place already, or you may find something from the list that we mentioned that would be helpful for you. But identify, two or three gaps or opportunities that you see in your team. Those could be a lack of a particular skill. Those could be perhaps some competency, clarity and competencies. It could be role clarity. What is it that
Mhm.
you identify, and build a plan to address that? Take 30 days, 60 days, and follow that plan and check in with your group regularly and see if you notice a difference. See if you begin to close the gap a
Mhm.
little bit. And it's through that constant process of assessing, identifying, putting plans and actions in, activating that, regrouping, reassessing, and you just apply over and over so that you can get that winning team to drive business outcomes.
I think it's very important with the development plans when you establish them. I always encourage the leaders that I work with to find one micro change that they can do in a 7-day period and one change in a week that starts to build that motivation kind of keeps the plan on track. So, sometimes people think 30 days, 60 days can be very lofty. What is one minor change or
Mhm.
small change that you can make in that first 7 days to kind of get that person bought in so that they're ready to kind of take the next step? And it's almost rebuilding that trust factor. Like, okay, you're giving me this development opportunity. How do we leverage it? How do we move forward? I get that first quick win. Okay, this is going to work. Let's try something else. So I definitely think the 2 to 3, top three, don't do more than three.
Yeah, don't do
If
more
you
than
do
three.
more than three, things start to implode, nothing gets accomplished, and you almost feel frustrated, like, okay, development plans don't work. Don't do more than three. In our professional opinions, three is the maximum.
Yeah.
Um,
A
and I
coach rarely
encourage,
tells an athlete 100 things that they've done wrong. or 100 things they have to fix. They focus on one thing, they fix one thing, and then they go to the next.
Mhm.
And that if you're laser focused on that, then it gets done.
So I think our friend Phil has another quote for us here.
Good teams become great ones when the members trust each other enough to surrender the me for the we. And I think we saw multiple examples of that in the Olympics, not just with the individual performers, because they're all the individual athletes are all part of a team. But then you saw the team members showing up for other individuals' competitions for other sports. So
Right.
yes, they're a team on the cross country ski, but they're also part of the Olympic team, or they're part of and I think that that's what you feel with the Olympics, that it's just demonstrated in such a beautiful way. Um, the other thing I want to point out here is, uh, and Ro, I share this with you, something that struck me with this particular Olympics, which I've not seen done in the past with the opening ceremonies. Typically, there's more than one venue where the Olympics are being held, right? Because no one venue has enough space. So in this particular case, I think there were five venues. So if you saw the opening games, the athletes that are competing the day after the opening games, if they are not at the main venue, typically don't participate in the opening ceremonies because they don't have time to get back to wherever they're going. This year, they did opening ceremonies in each of the satellite venues so that all of the athletes could participate in the opening games, which is just it's part of the whole experience, and it's part of that whole collective team. We're team USA, we're team Italy, we're team Canada, whatever we are, but to participate in that. And I think as we think about our workplaces now, where we may have multiple offices, we may have people working remotely, and there
Mhm.
may be a tendency to spend more time or notice more things or give examples about people that are working in the office where you're working without giving the appropriate attention to those that are working in other offices. So just take that final lesson from the Olympic analogy, that we're all one team, and this good teams become great ones when we think about we and not, oh, yeah, that's Rose, she's from the home office.
Right. Oh, there we go.
Well, thank you everyone for taking time this afternoon to enjoy this conversation. We hope you're walking away with a couple of tidbits that will be helpful for you or the leaders in your organization as you continue to build your Olympic teams. On behalf of Ro and myself and all of us at Exude, we always appreciate you taking time to tune in, and we hope to see you on our future webinar. Coming up next month, we have our first for 2026 of the Morning Blend. So take a look out for the invitations. And Ro, thank you as always for your insights and energy.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. This was great conversation. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Our emails are listed here on the screen, and we look forward to engaging with you all. Hope everyone stays safe, stays warm if you're local, and happy melting.
Take care,
Take
everybody.
care, everybody.